Did you know that parents rank teaching financial literacy as the toughest life skill? That's where Greenlight comes in, the debit card and money app made for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and track spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn how to earn, save, and spend responsibly, while parents have peace of mind knowing smart money habits are being built with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery. That's greenlight.com/Wondery.
Never go to the second location. Always trust your gut.
Hello, my name is Chrissy Champagne, and you are listening to Residue, a true crime podcast dedicated to keeping you paranoid. I think I'm paranoid and complicated. Are there any other 90s riot girls out there like me? I love Shirley Manson. Wouldn't that be so cool if I could get Garbage to do my theme song? It would be perfect. I loved the 90s, the riot girls, because they were such badasses. And yeah, speaking of badasses, we are going to be talking about Theresa Saldana today. Major badass. She starred in the made-for-television film Victims for Victims, the Theresa Saldana Story. Yeah, you heard that right. Theresa Saldana starred in her own made-for-TV movie about her own life and recovering from being stalked, from being attacked, and then from having to recover. She stars in this movie and replays every single scene over again. It is insane. Before we get to Theresa's story, let's just get all of the business out of the way. First of all, thank you all for being here. I love my Resi crew, my Resi dudes. I appreciate you all so much. And if you haven't already, please don't forget to hit that follow button. That way you will know when the new episodes come out. You will know to meet us back here every single Tuesday at midnight. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Residue Podcast, TikTok, and Facebook at Residue, a true crime podcast. And thank you guys so much for the DMs and the Spotify comments, the Apple reviews. It has been amazing to be able to connect with you all. And I'm happy I had a few of you singing Andy Gibb all throughout the day after listening to these episodes. And on that note, connecting with you. Don't forget that the best thing that you could possibly do to help out the podcast, if you wanted to, is leave a 5-star review. I have been loving these reviews that you've been leaving me. When you leave a 5-star review, especially on Apple, it pushes the podcast out to more listeners so we can have an even bigger audience than we already have now. We can have the biggest Resi crew ever. As you know, Residue is created, hosted, written, researched, produced, and edited by me, Chrissy Champagne. I appreciate you all so much for being here, and as always, listener discretion is advised. Victims for Victims, the Theresa Saldana Story is a 1984 made-for-television movie. It aired on NBC on December 12th, 1984. In 1982, actress Theresa Saldana was stabbed 10 times by an obsessive stalker named Arthur Richard Jackson, and he tracked her down using illegally obtained information, and she survived thanks to a bystander and months of medical care. But not long after recovering, Theresa decided to publicly share her story to help others. So NBC adapted her story into this made-for-television movie, and then they asked Theresa, do you want to play yourself? Now, it's one thing to hear that an actress played herself in a movie about her own life, but it is another thing to witness Theresa's brilliance in this movie. This movie, I rewatched it a week ago before I recorded this episode, and tears. Nonstop tears. I did not expect to cry that much. I was actually scared. I was frightened watching what she had to go through and knowing that this woman not only did she go through this, but she then gets on a movie set and she recreates every single awful thing that happened to her. Theresa should have 100% won an Emmy for this performance. I was crying. I had chills. Also, Theresa is one of the most beautiful, most gorgeous human beings I've ever seen in my life. Her face is just mesmerizing throughout this entire film. You can definitely see why big-time Hollywood directors wanted to work with Theresa. I'm talking Brian De Palma and Martin Scorsese. So Theresa plays herself in this movie, and then Adrian Zmed. I know that it's pronounced Zmed, but when it's coming out of my mouth, I'm like Zmed, Adrian Zmed. You might know Adrian from Grease too. I was thinking, so I'm watching this made-for-television film, and I'm watching the scenes with Adrian in them. There are many bedroom scenes, romantic scenes, because, Adrian's playing Theresa's then-husband, Fred. He has his shirt wide open in a lot of the scenes. Adrian's ripped, they're making out, and I'm like, did Theresa handpick who she wanted to play her husband in this movie? And Victims for Victims was also nominated for the Outstanding Achievement in Makeup at the 37th Primetime Emmy Awards. I haven't been able to get this movie out of my head since I rewatched. I do have a link in the show notes if you wanted to check this out on YouTube. I have to just say this, after researching Theresa, researching what she went through, listening to her speak in interviews, that question that people sometimes ask, if you could have dinner with anyone, who would it be? I would pick Theresa Saldana. Theresa was just such an inspiring woman. She was a survivor. She was well-spoken and obviously very easy on the eyes. So let's get into Theresa's story. Theresa Saldana was born August 20th, 1954 in Brooklyn, New York. And growing up in Brooklyn, Theresa was very attached to her mom. Like, she never wanted to be without her mother. Theresa was attached to her mother's hip as a toddler, and a pediatrician actually recommended putting Theresa in dancing classes, maybe just get some energy out. So at the age of only 2 years old, Theresa started dancing and she fell in love with it instantly. Like, her dream was to become a dancer. Dance became Theresa's world until a tumbling accident left her in a body cast. And she was unable to dance for nearly 2 years. So during that difficult period, a friend suggested that she try acting classes instead. And her parents weren't thrilled with this idea, but acting gave Theresa a new creative outlet while still allowing her to stay close to music and movement. Theresa was incredibly close to her family. Her mother was named Davina and her father named Tony Saldana. Theresa was adopted at only 5 days old by Davina and Tony. And even from a very young age, Theresa knew she was destined to be an entertainer. In fact, her first dream was to become a tightrope walker. And when that didn't really pan out, she moved on to dancing and then acting. She just knew no matter what she does in this life, it's going to be in the entertainment business. And by high school, Theresa was already performing in dinner theaters and showcases. She was determined to make performing her life. She signed with agent Selma Rubin when she was still very young, and she threw herself into training. In fact, her days were packed. She had Catholic school in the morning. She was only in school until 1:00 p.m. every day, and then she would take the train into the village where she was a waitress. And then after that, she would have acting classes at the studio. And then her weekends were dedicated to singing lessons and speech lessons. She became known for her discipline and her work ethic. She had a clever audition strategy. Theresa was always dressing in character for the role she wanted. And this helped her book more jobs. In an interview with Ryan Keating, which I also have linked in my show notes, Theresa talks about how most people didn't dress up for the role that they were auditioning for. They would just show up in jeans and a t-shirt, and many of her friends didn't believe it was necessary, but Theresa felt like it was necessary. It helped her get into character. It helped the director and the casting agent recognize something different in her. So Theresa was spotted by a talent scout while she was performing in this off-Broadway musical called The New York City Street Show, and this was in 1977. By 1978, she was cast in her first film, Nunzio. So this 1978 film, Nunzio, this was a very important step in Theresa's career, and it was a noticeable step upward. But the films that followed brought her much wider recognition, and they eventually led to her breakthrough in the acting world. The first film was I Want to Hold Your Hand, 1978, and this film was released the same year as Nunzio, but it was her next major project. Theresa played Theresa, one of the Beatles-obsessed teens in Roger Zemeckis' first feature film, and this role is what put her on the map nationally, and critics praised her energy, her comedic timing, her screen presence. Theresa says that this was the film that got her noticed on the streets, that she would be walking down the New York City streets and people would often come up to her and ask for her autograph. Next up was Defiance from 1980. This was a gritty New York City action drama starring Jan Michael Vincent, and Theresa played one of the neighborhood residents caught in a turf war. This movie helped her move into more serious, dramatic roles like Raging Bull, 1980. Yes, Theresa caught the eye of Martin Scorsese, and this is her most acclaimed film role. She played Lenore LaMotta, the wife of Joey LaMotta, played by Joe Pesci. And even though it was a supporting role, her performance in Martin Scorsese's Oscar-winning film raised her profile significantly. In 1982, fresh from coming off of the movie Raging Bull, Theresa is starting to become noticed. She is about to become a star, and she catches the eye of a man named Arthur Richard Jackson. He was a mentally ill Scottish drifter, and he becomes obsessed with Theresa after seeing her in the movie Defiance. And now later in life, while being interviewed, Theresa would talk about the fact that she wasn't aware of the impact she had on other people's lives by doing these movies. And she didn't know that there's a man in Scotland becoming obsessed, beyond obsessed with her. Arthur Richard Jackson says he's hearing angels talk to him, and they are telling him he must kill Theresa Saldana. Arthur Richard Jackson hires a private investigator, and this private investigator finds Theresa Saldana's mother's phone number. So Arthur calls her mother, pretending to be an assistant of Martin Scorsese, and he's hyping up this new movie that they want Theresa to be in, but he's telling her mom that he can't get a hold of her and he's going to need her address because he has to get to her house and he has to talk to her as soon as possible for this role. So Theresa's mother gives Arthur Theresa's home address. So Theresa gets a phone call from her mom explaining that Mr. Scorsese wants her for his next picture, and Theresa's excited. You know, she's really stoked about this. But then that night, while she's home alone in her apartment, her husband's at work, Theresa gets a call from her agent. And her agent is like, honey, listen to me. We've got a guy that we need to watch out for. We got a strange call today from somebody saying that he's with Scorsese, but we know he's not. And we found out that he got your home address from your mother. You need to stay alert, stay paranoid. You need to keep a lookout and have your husband with you at all times because we don't know what this guy's going to do. And at this time, it's the 80s. Stalking wasn't really taken that seriously, and there were no protocols set up for actors and actresses in the business. So Theresa's frightened. She's a nervous wreck, and her husband is taking her everywhere. He's walking her to her car. He's there when she gets out of school. He's always home with her. But this one morning, when Theresa wakes up, she feels like maybe this has blown over. She's in a great mood. This guy hasn't tried to contact her. Everything seems to be going okay. And her husband's in the shower, and she needs to get to school. So he's like, no, honey, wait till I get out of the shower. Do not walk through this apartment complex by yourself. I will help you. She's like, don't be silly. She walks out to her vehicle. On March 15th, 1982, Arthur Jackson approaches from behind Theresa. She's at her car. She can see a man coming up behind her because her car window is showing his reflection. She turns around and he says, "Are you Theresa Saldana?" and immediately starts stabbing her over and over in broad daylight, in front of neighbors, in front of other vehicles. People are just standing around and watching this happen. Nobody is doing anything. Keep in mind now that Theresa recreates these events in the made-for-TV movie Victims for Victims. This man brought a 5.5-inch hunting knife, and his attack was so fierce. He stabbed her so hard that that blade bent. He punctured one of Theresa's lungs, and she just keeps fighting back, screaming for help. She's on the ground. This guy's on top of her. Now, while this attack is happening and nobody's doing anything, there are even children present watching this. There is a delivery man who is in one of the apartment buildings up on the top floor delivering a package. This guy's name is Jeff Fenn. He comes running down all of these stairs in this apartment. He is running towards the screams. He is going to do whatever is possible to help Theresa. And now in the movie, when you see this guy running down the street, I called him a hunk. And I just want to go back to last week's episode where I said, people don't use the word hunk. I used the word hunk. So maybe we should bring it back. But this hunk comes running down the street. His blonde hair is flowing in the wind. He's just muscular, and he runs up to Arthur Jackson and he rips him off of Theresa and holds him down onto the ground, takes the knife away from him, and just holds him until the police can get there. And at the same time, Theresa doesn't even look back to see who helped her. She just starts running. She runs all the way back to her apartment, and her husband is just getting out of the shower, seeing this just bloody mess. His wife, she's covered completely in blood and she can't breathe, and she's saying, "Help me." But the voice can barely come out of her because she got a lung punctured. So she falls to the ground in the apartment. And Theresa's husband, Fred, calls for help. Theresa is rushed to the hospital. She nearly died. If Jeff Fenn didn't intervene, Theresa would have died because Arthur wasn't going to stop stabbing her. She got to the hospital, had already lost a massive amount of blood, and immediately had to undergo multiple surgeries. When Theresa arrived at the hospital, doctors did not think that she was going to make it. They considered her condition critical with the loss of blood and these 10 deep stab wounds. She had serious injuries to her lungs, diaphragm, ribs, internal organs. She had trauma to her arms and her torso from defensive wounds. Theresa later said that she could hear paramedics saying she might not make it. Theresa spent weeks in intensive care, followed by months of ongoing treatment, and her recovery involved multiple surgeries to repair punctured organs, treatment for infections, breathing issues due to lung damage, extreme physical pain, difficulty moving her arms and upper body. She had to relearn basic movement patterns, months of physical therapy, and a gradual rebuild of strength and stamina. Arthur Jackson was immediately arrested, and he claimed to be the benevolent angel of death, even claiming that he wished he brought a gun instead, because then he would have gotten the job done and he would have been able to meet Theresa in heaven. So this psychopath is in custody and Theresa is recovering, but now she has to think about the fact that she's going to have to face him in a courtroom. And while she's in the hospital trying to recover, she's a nervous wreck. She's afraid of everyone. She doesn't want anyone around her. She doesn't even want to go out in her wheelchair, have her husband take her for a walk because she doesn't want strangers anywhere near her. Theresa remains hospitalized for so long, and it's such a grueling recovery that the public followed her recovery through news updates, and everyone was hearing about the physical recovery, like what Theresa was going through, but nobody was hearing about the psychological recovery, what people often overlook with the emotional toll that these attacks can have on not only Theresa, but her entire family, on her friends. She was suffering from severe flashbacks and trauma and this intense fear that Jackson might somehow return. Theresa later said that the emotional part of her recovery was harder than the physical. In the movie, there are scenes of Theresa's friends visiting her, and they're not able to handle what she's going through. It's almost like they're coming to visit her, but she has to take care of them because they can't handle what she looks like or seeing her scars from the knife wounds. And Theresa was unable to sleep if her mother wasn't there. So her mother was with her every single day through every single step of this process. Her whole family was there. Surviving a nearly fatal assault will cause overwhelming stress on a relationship, not just with her friends and her family, but with her husband, Fred. And Theresa's marriage was starting to crumble. So Theresa rarely discussed these details publicly. I mean, there are scenes in the made-for-television movie. You can see the breakdown of the marriage. You can see how stressed out her husband, Fred, was. He lost his job. He couldn't pay the bills. The financial strain from this hospital stay was just overwhelming on the couple. And you have to imagine the guilt that Fred was feeling. They touch on it a little bit in the movie. He wasn't there to save his wife. Another man was. And he carried that guilt with him. The couple started dealing with the psychological trauma that Theresa was coping with and the constant media attention. She then had this radical shift in her identity. She went from actress to survivor. Recovery shaped Theresa's life. This is the turning point in her life. Theresa's hospital and recovery period transformed her because she felt a responsibility to speak for victims who didn't survive. Theresa is dealing with recovery, and then she's dealing with the breakdown of her marriage, and now she has to deal with a trial. At this point, Theresa is recovering in the motion picture hospital. Theresa spent 4 months recovering at the Motion Picture Hospital, and it is here, at this hospital, that she decided to form the organization Victims for Victims. And this was after meeting other women who have gone through the same thing. And this organization wasn't just for women. This was for anyone who was a victim, who survived and didn't have anybody to talk to. Nobody knew what they were going through. Theresa met a woman named Miriam Schneider, and Miriam was a school teacher. She was shot in her classroom by one of her students, and she survived. So after meeting Miriam, the two decide to form this self-help group. Theresa says she believes that she survived this attack because this was her calling. This was her purpose, to help other victims. And while she's recovering physically, mentally, she's getting her spirit back, she still has to deal with the trial. According to court records, while waiting for the police, a witness asked Jackson why he stabbed Theresa, and he replied that it would all be explained by the contents of his black satchel, which was lying in the street. So this satchel contained a document entitled Death Sentence Petition, and this was a diary inscribed with Jackson's name. It said on the diary, it read, "Care of the office of Michael, the Archangel and Vice President of Heaven." One of the defense attorneys, one of the defense psychiatrists that testified said very simply, "That man is crazy." Jackson believed himself to be acting on behalf of the Order of the Knights of St. Michael and the Kingdom of Heaven. He believed that he was on a divine mission to kill Theresa Saldana and take her with him to the hereafter, the better life, God's kingdom. And according to court records, Jackson himself intended to be executed by the state, quote, with music over the public address system and light refreshment for the observers. Arthur Richard Jackson is found guilty. He was convicted of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon and received a 12-year sentence in a California prison. And while serving out his sentence, he continued speaking about Theresa Saldana in delusional and often violent terms. According to a December 5th, 1990 LA Times Archives article, actress Theresa Saldana testified that she was terrified that the man who nearly killed her in 1982 could carry out his alleged death threats because he had befriended criminals in prison that could kill her. So, because of these letters, because of these threats, he was paroled early in 1990, but he was not released from custody because of new charges stemming from these letters. So now they're having a trial because of these letters, and Theresa is on the stand again. This is in 1990, and they're asking her, are you still frightened? Do you think that he could kill you? Do you really believe this? And Theresa replies, I believe someone who stabs someone 10 times is capable of being in contact with terrorist organizations. You know, it's pretty fucked up that she had to survive all of this, and now the guy's getting paroled, and he's still threatening to kill her, and now she has to go back to trial and testify whether or not she's frightened of this man. That is really messed up. Theresa testifies that she saw her family's reaction to these letters, and shortly after her mother and father viewed these letters, her father passed away within a few weeks. And she says, I remember one of the letters saying that he swore on the ashes of his dead mother and the scars of Theresa Saldana that he, being Arthur Jackson, would complete his divine mission of killing me, and that he discussed better ways of killing me so he wouldn't fail the next time he tried. These letters terrified Theresa to the point of her nightmares coming back, insomnia. She was required to be hospitalized for 5.5 weeks, and then she had to return to psychiatric therapy, the same therapy that she underwent after this 1982 attack. Now she's here in 1990. She's trying to get herself back together, her life back together, and this shit is still happening. I mean, these seem like pretty obvious answers to stupid questions that they are asking at this trial. Are you scared that he might come back and get you again? What do you guys think? Hell yeah, she's got to be scared. The guy is fucking nuts. Okay, so authorities consider Arthur Richard Jackson to be dangerous, but when his sentence was over, they had to release him. And once his sentence was complete, Jackson was deported back to Scotland, where he was wanted for a 1966 robbery and murder. So during this trial in the UK, he was found not guilty by diminished responsibility in 1997 and committed to a British psychiatric hospital where he died of heart failure in 2004 at the age of 68. This attack on Theresa deeply affected her marriage to Fred, and Theresa never publicly blamed Fred, and she rarely discussed the breakdown of the marriage. But Theresa and Fred met and married in 1977. He was a part of her New York City performing circle. He was there with her throughout her entire early career of Nunzio, the Beatlemania, I Want to Hold Your Hand, Raging Bull. Fred was there by her side, supporting all of her dreams. And they were still married in 1982 during the attack, but her physical recovery took months. It involved constant medical care. As we said, she was struggling with such severe trauma that Fred had difficulty watching her recover. And then this made-for-television film, he had difficulty watching her relive this attack, not only through this movie, but through her activism. So this relationship just fell apart under the extreme level of trauma that it was forced to face. Theresa and Fred divorced in 1984, and she spoke very little about it publicly. But what she did say was, the attack changed everything about my life. Everything. In March of 1989, Theresa married for a second time to Phil Peters, and Theresa and Phil had a daughter, Theresa Saldana Peters. They remained together until Theresa's death. Theresa Saldana died on June 6th, 2016 at age 61 from complications of pneumonia. In interviews throughout the 80s and 90s, Theresa repeatedly said, "I am alive because of Jeff." She praised his bravery, called him her hero, and expressed gratitude publicly. Jeff did visit Theresa in the hospital, and she credits him for saving her life. Jeff Fenn was just an everyday hero. Theresa Saldana survived the unthinkable. She survived a nightmare, and she took that pain and she turned it into purpose, becoming a voice for victims everywhere. Stay safe and stay paranoid. Stay paranoid.